What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Fight Night, Kansas City, Missouri, headlined by Max Holloway and Arnold Allen. Now, we got to talk about the fact that the UFC makes its way over to Kansas City, Missouri, and you don't really have a lot of those glory MMA fitness fighters fighting on the fight card. You got a couple guys from the area, but if you were to be talking about the UFC making its way back to this vicinity a couple years ago, you would be talking about all of James Krause's guys fighting amongst this card. And now we're at a point where James Krause wouldn't even be allowed to walk into the event and into the arena. So thought that was just an interesting tidbit there. Great main event matchup between Holloway and Arnold Allen. Major implications for the division. And before we jump into the first fight real quick, if you guys haven't caught my recap of UFC 287 yet, you guys know it was a tough one for me. You guys know the free play coming your guys' way did not cash, but do understand that it was only a 1 unit loss. All right, so we're 5-1 on those free plays, with the one loss being a 1 unit loss on a hefty underdog there on Santiago Ponzinibbio at plus 230 odds. So listen, I don't want to hear nothing about it. You guys know I'm coming back with fire, and I promise you the next one's going to cash. In fact, I do want to say, although we had a very rough card this past weekend, we very, very rarely come off, back to back unprofitable events or have two cards back to back that don't go very well. So you guys know I am due for a major bounce back card here. I love the fact that we have 14 fights to choose from, and you guys know sometimes it just seems that these sleeper cards, these cards that aren't the biggest of ones, are the ones that we really just annihilate as far as just cashing in on our official plays. So that's what you guys can expect. I want to be completely transparent. That's what I'm about. I've been hustling, cramming a bunch of tape for this event here, and I feel very good about the spots that I'm going to be attacking here. So shout out to all you guys for supporting me, supporting the channel. Please hit that like button, subscribe, catch me on all my social media, and let's go check out the first fight here.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
So kicking the event off, we have a bantamweight matchup over on the women's side of things between Joselyne Edwards and Lucie Pudilová. Now, if you guys remember, Lucie Pudilová, she had an initial stint in the UFC some time ago. She went on a 4-fight losing skid. Now, she was fighting some decent competition, but she did get her walking papers. She went back over to the Czech Republic, where she really had a lot of success, winning multiple fights. In fact, the only fight that she lost, she had a big fight with Talita Bernardo. If you guys remember Talita Bernardo, she's now in Invicta FC. She's a fighter that, since she was cut from the UFC a while back, has really went on a tear herself. I think that both of these fighters, well, obviously Lucie is here back in the UFC, but both of these fighters are deserving to be in the UFC. So keep an eye on Talita Bernardo as well, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt specialist, who did defeat Lucie Pudilová. But the point being is that Lucie Pudilová, she had went back to the Czech Republic, and she has continuously grown as a fighter. We all knew her initially as more of a striking-based fighter as she came over to the mixed martial arts side of things. We saw in her last fight that her groundwork is definitely evolving and developing. She had a lot of success in that last fight there against Yanin Wu, where she eventually finished the fight down on the mat. Joselyne Edwards. Joselyne Edwards is a solid athlete for the division. She has a solid frame for the division. She's a good striker. I'm very interested to see how the striking exchanges will take place in this matchup here. But I am also interested to see if Joselyne Edwards' ground game and takedown defense still holds up. She was able to have success in her last 2 fights, but don't forget, in the past she has struggled with her takedown defense, specifically in her fight with Jessica Rose Clark. Jessica Rose Clark was able to close the distance and have a lot of success in that match there. Now, Edwards did bounce back with 2 victories over Romana Pasquale and Ji Yeon Kim, but do understand that both of those fighters really don't have a strength in the grappling department. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I was impressed with what Lucie Pudilová did in her last fight, but then you also need to take into consideration that the opponent that she was facing off against in Yanan Wu isn't really a standout there either. So a lot of moving parts. One thing I will say is if Joselyne Edwards can keep this fight standing, although Pudilová has that striking background as well, Joselyne Edwards has been a little bit more successful, I guess you would say, statistically inside the octagon, landing 5.61 significant strikes per minute, while Lucie Pudilová only landing 4.17. Joselyne Edwards, 53% of her strikes are significant compared to Lucie Pudilová's 37%. So Joselyne Edwards having a little bit more oomph on her shots. And also Lucie Pudilová absorbing 3.98 strikes per minute, while Edwards landing absorbing 3.65. So also absorbing a slightly less than Pudilová. So when you kind of analyze all those numbers, I mean, you do see a little bit of an edge for Joselyne Edwards on the feet. I mean, there's definitely some realistic potential there. Another thing to keep an eye on, Joselyne Edwards, only 27 years old. She now has 16 pro fights. I do believe that we have not seen near the final product of Edwards, obviously, and I think that there's a lot of room for growth there. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a fight that plays out very closely. But I will say this: I will take Lucie Pudilová to win this fight. I like her here. We'll get to the betting line in 1 second, but Lucie Pudilová, she's shown some good development in her overall game, and I think the X factor of her potentially using her grappling here and also on the feet, there is also great potential that she can edge out a decision there. So you mix that all together. I gotta lean Pudilová. This is a close fight. The -145 tag on Pudilová, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily crazy about it, but I think it's an accurate line. I do. I think that there should be a slight lean towards her way. Maybe it should be -135, 130 or whatnot. But this line should stay relatively close, and I think that the lean towards Pudilová is warranted when you kind of remember back Edwards' fights against Carol Rosa and Jessica Rose Clark there. So we'll see how this fight plays out. Gaston Bolaños making his UFC debut this upcoming Saturday, taking on Aaron Phillips. Aaron Phillips, a fighter that has been in the UFC for quite some time, and it just has not been that active. I believe his last fight was in 2020. Also, he had an initial stint in the UFC a while back, left. Had some victories outside the octagon and made his way back. He had one more fight in the octagon where he took a loss against Jack Shore. He was submitted. Gaston Bolaños, if you're not familiar with him, this is a fighter coming in with a pretty solid striking pedigree, and it's a perfect fight card for him to fight on, right? Coming off a fight card where we just had two fighters in the main event that came in with those significant striking backgrounds, and we've seen the success that they have had in the mixed martial arts world. Of course, Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. Well, Gaston Bolaños is dangerous on the feet. We've seen him over in Bellator, consistently landing this nasty spinning back elbow. He's a tricky striker, and he's definitely live to starch anybody on the feet in mixed martial arts. How will he hold up overall with his takedown defense and his grappling? We definitely still need to see a lot more from him there. Aaron Phillips, does he have the ground game to go out there and try to exploit the kickboxer, the striker there? I mean, I think that there's definitely some potential for that to happen, but not to be that hard on Aaron Phillips. I'm just kind of wondering what's been going on with him with the inactivity, and then if you also want to be brutally honest with the productivity that he's had in the octagon. Not a lot of it. He is 0-3 in the UFC. We talked about that loss he took against Jack Shore where he was submitted back in 2020. Jack Shore's talented down there, but, you go back to his initial stint in the UFC, taking losses to Sam Cecilia and Matt Hobar. Then he also took a loss to Chris Gutierrez, who we know is very talented. That was outside of the UFC. He was knocked out there or finished in the third round. And then he went on a nice little win streak. But if you take a look at the level of opponents, I'm not really too high on these guys. The Andy Brasset, Jeremy Rogers, Anthony Rektic, Devontae Sewell, Ariston Franca. You're not going to really recognize any of those names, and there's a reason why. So I need to see more from him. It seems that Aaron Phillips has been really giving back to the community and spending a lot of time working at, I believe it's his gym. Don't quote me there, but I know that he's definitely heavily involved with Head Kicks MMA and Fitness, I believe over in Lafayette. And, more power to him for stabilizing himself in multiple ways and giving back to the community, but I don't know if I could pick him here, just based on the fact that there's just not a lot going on, at least on paper. He really hasn't made that statement fight, and this is definitely an opportunity for him to do that. He's been in the sport of mixed martial arts long before Gaston Bolaños, but Bolaños has a very dangerous striking pedigree, and I think that he could definitely give Aaron Phillips some problems there on the feet. You take a look at the metrics of Aaron Phillips in the octagon in those 3 fights. He's only landing 1.65 strikes per minute, absorbing 3.44 per minute as well, at 39% defensive rate. I mean, there's not a lot going on with him right now. So this will be a huge fight for him to finally get some respect and prove himself. He has a name that's been around for a long time. It's so funny, right? He's only fought in the UFC 3 times, but if you're a real fight fan, you know about Aaron Phillips. He's just been a guy that's been around, and you kind of wonder why, right? I mean, he just doesn't have any victories in the octagon. He's not active at all. And but here he goes. One more shot here. And can he get this fight down to the mat and try to exploit the grappling of Gaston Bolaños, a fighter that if you want to talk about some of his MMA fights, he's been fighting over in Bellator, coming off a big victory, losses to fighters like Solo Hatley and whatnot. You know that he's sharpening his overall skill set, and if he could stuff those takedowns, it's going to be a problem for Aaron Phillips. I am going to take the kickboxer and Gaston Bolaños. I'll take him to win the fight here. He's a minus 190 favorite over Aaron Phillips. Almost a 2-1 favorite on a guy that hasn't necessarily proven that he is well-rounded enough to really hold his own in the octagon in the UFC. Time will tell. But I will pick him to win this fight. I'm not overly crazy about the betting line. I understand it. I think that there is a clear path to victory with his striking, and the fact that Aaron Phillips just really has never shown up. I kind of understand it, and I don't really have a problem with the minus 190, but at the same time, I'm not crazy about it. I guess you could say it's an accurate line there. 2 Brazilian strawweights set to scrap here. Obviously, Bruna Brazil's Brazilian, but so is Denise Gomes. Both fighters coming off Dana White's Contender Series. In fact, Bruna Brazil was said to have had the greatest knockout ever on Dana White's Contender Series for a woman. That's what Dana White had to say. And you know what? You ain't going to get an argument from me here. The beautiful head kick that she set up there, completely flatlining her opponent. It was impressive. She definitely has the striking to hang with many in the UFC. I do believe that. Now, she will have to continue to sharpen her overall game. You take a look at the 2 losses that she took as a pro. They were very early on in her career and against respectable opponents as well. She had the loss to Ariane Cornelosi, and then when you take a look at the other loss that she had, her opponent there is a reputable opponent as well. So those 2 losses not looking that bad. Very early on, you understand that she's trying to fine-tune her overall game. She has some pro boxing experience as well. She's a dangerous striker. She could obviously kick. We saw that. And then you have Denise Gomes, who was able to get the job done on Dana White's Contender Series, and then she got an opportunity to fight in the octagon already, and I was not impressed, to say the least. Now, she was fighting a pretty high-level opponent in Loma Legbumi. We know that she has beautiful Muay Thai, and she's been working on her overall game. But Loma, outstruck Denise Gomes 2-1, stuffed all of her takedowns, and in fact, when Gomes was shooting with those sloppy takedowns, Loma was even reversing her, getting on top, and really raining down some nasty ground and pound. I just was not that impressed with what I saw from Gomes in that fight. I know that she's still very young, and there's a lot of room for growth. She's only 23 years old, but I haven't been necessarily overwhelmed with what I've seen from her. In this fight here, she's going to be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage. She's going to be significantly shorter as well. About what do we got here? About 4 inches shorter. Bruna's really going to have that length to work the striking from the outside if she wants to do that. And I think that there is a great chance that we see the fight play out like that. But Bruna will have to keep Denise off her and just strike at range and really just set up those beautiful kicks that she throws and whatnot. I am siding with Bruna Brazil to get the job done here. Let's go take a look at the betting line. Bruna Brazil is a flat minus 200 right now. She's a 2-1 favorite, and you ain't gonna hear any arguments from me there. I think that that's warranted. She just seems to be the fighter that has much more promise right now. And Denise Gomes is just a young, tough girl that needs to show a lot more. Well, again, Bruna really has some things to work with in this division, and in the strawweight division that already has a lot of very polished and talented strikers. And I think that Gomes she's going to definitely have to sharpen some things up, or she can be in trouble and find her way back outside the UFC very quickly. So we'll see how the fight takes place. I don't have a problem with the minus 200 line. I got Bruna, Brazil landing some heavy shots here. Does she get another finish? I'm not really one to bank on female strawweight finishes due to strikes. So, if you're looking for another KO, TKO type finish prop from Bruna, Brazil, yeah, it might happen, but be a little bit careful. You better be getting a solid line on that because you don't see those types of finishes every day in the division. I'm really digging this lightweight matchup here. Lando Vannata taking on Daniel Zellhuber. First and foremost, we'll talk about Zellhuber. Zellhuber, only 23 years old, coming off a disappointing UFC debut where he took an L against Trey Ogden. We just saw Ogden take another L as well. That loss really not looking the best, especially when you understand that he was outstruck in that fight. Round to round, he was outstruck. And you thought maybe, if anything, that Trey was going to have the advantage trying to get Daniel down to the mat and maybe try to exploit his grappling. Daniel, he has a very long frame. He's a dangerous striker, a 77-inch reach for the lightweight division. And I feel like that UFC debut was pretty lackluster, if you ask me. Still a lot of room for growth, obviously, with him only being 23 years old. You love to see him shoulder to shoulder with a guy like that and Randy Couture. Hopefully he's just continuously learning here. And, he's going to have to when he's taking on a guy like Lando Vannata, who, some of you guys at first thought might think that Lando is washed up and, coming off a loss and has really had a tough time putting a winning streak together. You have to understand, Lando is only 31 years old still. He's been around for a long time. When you think about the short notice fight that he took on against Tony Ferguson, where he was really the first fighter to go in there and really, or one of the first fighters to go in there and really give Tony Ferguson some problems. If you remember, he was dropping Tony. We saw how tricky his striking was. That was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of ups and downs throughout Lando's career. But again, only 31 years old, and he's very hungry coming off the loss that he just took against Charles Jourdain, where he had some initial success in that fight. Obviously, he made some mistakes and things didn't go his way. But I think that Lando comes into this fight very motivated with a world of experience, a lot more experience than Daniel has. I know Daniel has 13 pro fights compared to Lando's 20 pro fights. There's not a significant difference there, but there is a significant difference in time spent in the gym, just being surrounded in the fight game. We know Lando, the longtime Jackson Wink product. I think that you're going to see a difference in experience here. Lando can mix things up. He has underrated grappling. We know he's a tricky striker as well. If you're telling me a guy like Trey can outstrike Daniel, I don't see any reason why Lando can't outstrike Daniel as well. Just understand that Daniel is very dangerous. He's very young, so there's room for growth there, and maybe he lands some nasty shots on Lando as well. If you remember Daniel's fight against Lucas Almeida on Dana White's Contender Series, he had a very slow start to that fight, but eventually picked things up. So we'll see maybe if Lando has some initial success, and then Daniel can look to pick things up. Lando kind of slowed down against Jourdain there as well. He had some issues moving through that fight, but I still got to side with Lando Vannata here. Lando will be at a 6-inch reach disadvantage. He'll be about 3-4 inches shorter, but you know what? He's looking to be in phenomenal shape. If you're catching him on IG, he looks to be in very good shape going into this fight. Klay Thompson vibes all day. And, but on a serious note, everything that I've been seeing from him, I really think that he's grinding in the gym right now, and he's coming in looking to snag a W here. So I am going to side with the veteran in Lando Vannata. Let's go take a look at the betting line and see what we're talking about here. Lando Vannata is a plus 106 dog, and you got Daniel Zellhuber at a minus 125, a very slight favorite. So people still respecting the potential that the Golden Boy has here. I need to see a little bit more from him. I need to see some success. I need to see some growth in his game. I'm going to side with the veteran here and Lando Vannata. I know we've been talking about a lot of the youth coming through and taking out these older fighters as of recently. Now, this fight, I don't necessarily think it's that type of fight, though. Remember what we talked about. Lando Vannata is 31 years old. He's not a 36, 37-year-old fighter. And Zellhuber is not a fighter cruising into his prime at 28, 29. He's still a very young kid, right? He is, 23 years old. So he's still learning. Just understand there what we've been talking about, the ages. In the recap video that we did on UFC 287, we've been talking about the success that a lot of these younger fighters have been having. But just understand this age frame is a little bit different than that. All right, so give me Lando Vannata here, and obviously I'll say that there's a little bit more value on his line, being that I'm edging him anyway. We got a strawweight matchup here between Piera Rodriguez and Gillian Robertson. Gillian Robertson, still only 27 years old. She's been around for a long time, but this girl is still evolving. We know that she has the grappling background. And, listen, Gillian Robertson, if you guys aren't following her over on Instagram, make sure you guys get over there and do so. Go do yourself a service and go follow her. I don't know what it is about her, but she's been looking like a nice cold glass of milk. As you reach over, grab that strawberry syrup. If you guys remember when you were a kid, not the chocolate syrup that you pour in your milk, but they had the strawberry version. Pour a little bit of that into the nice cold glass of milk, stir it up, and take a nice sip there. That's just what the vibes I'm getting from her these days. I've been enjoying checking out the IG of hers. And, on a serious note, she really is a very dangerous grappler. She's been working on her overall game, but her grappling can give a lot of girls problems in the division. Piera Rodriguez, though, has shown to be a pretty well-rounded fighter since coming off Dana White's Contender Series and working her way into the UFC. I've been decently impressed with what I've been seeing from her. She's still undefeated. Just had a victory over Sam Hughes. We know Sam Hughes just had a big-time victory to open up UFC 287. She's a well-rounded, dangerous fighter. The victory over Kay Hansen, who's now fighting over at Invicta, but a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt there. And I think that Piera Rodriguez has looked really good. And you talk about the victory she had on Dana White's Contender Series against Valeska Machado. Piera Rodriguez, a long-time Team Blackhouse product. She surrounds herself with a lot of solid talent. Sabina Mazo, there's a good amount of names over there that she's been training with. And to me, she just seems to have that it factor. I think that she's just the type of girl that gets to work. She's extremely tough, and she's just a serious opponent for anyone in the division, in my opinion. So I've been a little bit back and forth with how I see this fight going because I have been very high on the grappling of Gillian's, and of course, with the right matchup, Gillian can go out there and just completely expose her opponents, but I just don't think that Piera Rodriguez is that. When you break down tape on her more recent fights, I think that she is shown to be very well-rounded. There's been some dangerous and wild transitions going on, and she seems to be composed, and she handles herself right, and usually ends up on top or in a good position for her to work her way back up to the feet and use her striking. She's a very accurate striker as well. You take a look at the productivity they've had in the octagon. Piera Rodriguez, we'll slide over to the significant strikes here. Landing 3.91 strikes per minute, while Gillian Robertson only landing 2.28. She still needs to evolve with her striking a lot more. As far as what they absorb, pretty much even there. So, I think that the output of Piera will trump Gillian Robertson's here. And you take a look at the grappling, although you can't really just go just based off this, Piera Rodriguez only having those 3 fights, but Piera Rodriguez actually solidifying more takedowns, per minute in the UFC. Her takedown accuracy at 39%, Gillian's 41. A lot of similarities here, but one thing you keep an eye on as well is that Piera Rodriguez has a 77% takedown defensive rate, which is going to be important here. I want to see her stuffing the takedowns of Gillian's, keeping this fight on the feet, and kind of outpointing and picking Gillian apart. I wasn't crazy about the loss that Gillian just took against JJ Aldrich. You guys know I've been a fan of JJ's boxing, but JJ did not look that good in her last fight, and it just kind of dampers that loss there. She bounced back with the victory over Maria Agapova, who definitely is a head case. So when you kind of analyze some of her recent fights, it's just the submission loss to Priscilla Cachoeira. There's some, a victory. I'm sure she did choke out Priscilla Cachoeira, but before that, losses to Miranda Maverick and Talia Santos, who are 2 solid opponents. So, she's going to need to go out here and try to do something similar to what she did to Priscilla, try to get this fight down to the mat, pull off a sub, or really use her grappling to dominate. But I foresee Piera, even if she's taken down, working her way back up to the feet and kind of outpointing Gillian. I think this is a very close fight, but I will edge Piera Rodriguez, who will have the same reach at 63 inches, even though she's 2 inches taller, and to use that same reach there with maybe her more crisp and slightly better striking. We take a look at the betting line, -110 to -110. This is a dead pick'em fight. And as I said, I was a little bit back and forth. Initially, I was going to be rolling with Gillian Robertson. The more I was breaking down tape on Piera, I've been decently impressed with what she's been doing out there. So I will edge Piera Rodriguez with the pick'em line. You guys know that I feel that there's slightly more value on Piera Rodriguez there. Wouldn't be shocked if Gillian is able to use that grappling to edge a very close fight. I don't know if she necessarily gets the sub there. I mean, she's always live for a sub. She's dangerous, but Piera Rodriguez is pretty technically sound all around. Give me P-Rod there to win this fight here. A little bit of a throwback match here. Ed Short Fuse Herman taking on Zak Cummings. This fight taking place in the light heavyweight division. Of course, both these fighters, former staples of the UFC middleweight division. If that was a little bit before your time or you guys forgot, these guys were both at one point in time very solid middleweight fighters. Of course, it's been a while. Zak Cummings, 38 years old. He hasn't fought in 2.5 years. You take a look at him. If you follow him on IG, he's definitely put on some excess weight. I mean, he even has the hashtags in his post, that he's trying to lose weight, this and that. So he did let himself go quite a bit. He's also a part owner of a gym over in Missouri, and I believe it's Glory MMA Fitness. I don't know the exact details how all that went with James Krause being banned and no fighters fighting under that gym being able to fight in the UFC. I don't know to date all the details that have unraveled with that. You guys know that they were banned from fighting in the UFC, so I don't understand really how Cummings is still kind of threading through all that. It seems that his name is clear between all that nonsense with Krause, and he's still looking to get another UFC fight under his belt. And maybe he's looking to get another UFC fight under his belt based on the fact maybe he lost some money with that whole situation going on. So I don't know exactly the details. I won't speculate too much. I'll just tell you this. At one point in time, Zak Cummings was a very solid fighter in the UFC's middleweight division. I really believe that. If you take a look at his resume, he's battled. He's 24-7. Even when you take a look at some of his losses, Amari Akhmedov, a very talented fighter, that was a close one against Michel Prazeres. A lot of people thought that he won that fight, and then losses to Gunnar Nelson and Santiago Ponzinibbio back in the day when they were really in their primes too. So other than that, going out there, submitting guys like Nathan Koy, the ATT product, Alexander Yokolev, the Russian product, the Russian fighter there, Trevor Hot Sauce Smith, Trevin Giles, coming off a victory against Alessio De Chirico. He has had some good success in the UFC, and I'm interested to see how he bounces back going up to the light heavyweight division, taking a guy on like Ed Herman. Now, when you take a look at their significant strikes, the productivity they've had in the UFC, it's kind of hard just to go off these numbers. A lot of these numbers that we're kind of analyzing are from Ed Herman over a decade ago. Ed Herman now 42 years old. So we saw that Ed Herman has definitely taken a step back with his skill set. If you take a look at what he's been doing as of recently, first off, he should have had a loss against Mike Rodriguez, if you remember, but props to him for sticking in that fight when he was basically finished, right? They called it a low blow when he was hit to the midsection. He was finished, but the referee gave him another opportunity. Props to him for staying in that fight and getting a Kimura victory over Rodriguez, but he should have been finished there. And then he just took a loss to Alonzo Menafield, and he looked very sluggish in that fight as well. But props to him for surviving and not getting knocked out by Menafield, because a lot of men do get finished there. So showcasing the toughness that he possesses. Let's see here. Both men 75-inch reaches, very similar in stature. I won't go on too much. I mean, this is just an interesting fight with both these guys being up there in age. I'm going to take Zak Cummings. I think that even though Zak Cummings, he's put on a lot of weight as of recently, and he's trying to get back into shape and all that, I still got to say that I think that there's a greater opportunity we see a more decent version or a more of a version of Cummings of what he was back in the day compared to Ed Herman. I really think that we're going to see him kind of deteriorate, and I think maybe we see that this being his retirement fight. All right, so let me not ramble too much more. Give me Zak Cummings, a -240 line. I don't know if I'm crazy about that line, but I get it. I think that Cummings is going to land some good shots. He's a good striker. He's a good, well-rounded fighter. And I think he has a little bit more to offer here. It would be hard for me to say I'm siding with Ed Herman, even at a +193 line, just based on the fact of how sloppy and aged he's looked. Give me Zak Cummings. Rambling about these two OGs in the game here. We got a top 5 flyweight showdown here. You guys know I love this division. Brandon Royval, without a doubt, one of the most exciting fighters to watch perform in the UFC today. Taking on Matheus Nicolau, the number 5 ranked flyweight fighter. Both of these guys, 30 years old. Royval will be 3 inches taller. He will have a 2-inch reach advantage. We know Royval is scrappy. He's wild. He's unpredictable and has definitely given his opposition some issues inside the cage. Now, Matheus Nicolau, I've been pretty high on him. You guys know that I've been very high on Alexandre Pantoja and Matheus Nicolau. I think that they're two fighters in the division that are really dark horses to eventually hold the gold. I think that one of these two men will have the potential to do so. Matheus Nicolau, a fighter that had the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background kind of coming into MMA, but has really became a very talented and polished striker as well. He's a very well-rounded fighter. Obviously, his girl just got the victory this past weekend. I don't know if you guys agreed with that decision there. Luana Pinheiro got the victory over Michelle Waterson. I believe that they're married, or I don't know. I mean, she didn't take the last name yet. Luana Pinheiro. It should be Luana Nicolau. I don't know what's going on with there. Maybe they're boyfriend and girlfriend, but they've been together for some time. Both very well-rounded fighters. They have that dangerous jiu-jitsu. They have the dangerous striking. Royval, like I said, a little bit more wild. And, that's going to lean me towards picking Matheus Nicolau here. I like the fact that Nicolau is just a little bit more patient. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say patient, a little bit more technical, a little bit more cerebral, where Brandon Royval is just an absolute tornado. And that could definitely give the opposition some problems. But I think a guy like Matheus Nicolau will kind of make reads off that and just be a little bit more composed, and could potentially make Royval pay. If you take a look at some of Royval's losses as of recently, the Brandon Moreno loss, he did get injured, but he was kind of a little wild there. The Alexandre Pantoja loss, where he was submitted, getting a little bit too wild, making some mistakes down on the mat, eventually submitted. I could see something similar going on with Matheus Nicolau. I told you guys, Nicolau reminds me very much of Pantoja. Matheus Nicolau, 19-2-1, man. He's been around the block. He has a good amount of fight experience, and I am going to side towards his way here. Brandon Royval with 100% takedown accuracy. Not that he's the greatest wrestler. I mean, I think it just kind of played out like that based on the fights that he's been in. He's maybe not taking a lot of shots at takedowns, but the ones that he has, he's got the fight down to the mat. I don't think that that's I don't think that is necessarily an avenue for success here. If he's shooting and even getting a takedown on Nicolau, Nicolau is very dangerous off his back. He's very live to reverse him and do some damage there himself. Nicolau with a 93% takedown defensive rate again, so he's just a very polished grappler, if you ask me. On the feet. Nothing too crazy going on here. Nicolau landing a little bit more so than Brandon Royval. But let's cut to the chase. I think that Matheus Nicolau will be a little bit more polished, a little bit more technical, and that will lean me towards his way. But I wouldn't be shocked if the tornado of Brandon Royval ends up capitalizing on some type of mistake of Nicolau. I wouldn't be shocked, but I wouldn't bank on it. I'd bank on Matheus being calm, composed, being a true veteran, and just being in the right positions at the right time, and eventually making Brandon Royval pay at one point in time in this fight. So give me Matheus Nicolau. He's a -190 favorite. I kind of expected that line to be right around there. So, I'm not crazy about it, but I'm not shocked it's that high. Just do understand that Brandon Royval is a very dangerous opponent. He has a little bit of a natural size advantage here. He could very well be in the mix in this fight here. So maybe some value on Royval, but I want to be clear. I do have Matheus Nicolau winning this fight. And there's even a potential for him to get a finish one way or another, maybe get that sub, or if Royval just gets crazy on the feet, he might get cracked with the shot too. So give me Matheus Nicolau to get the job done here and to work his way into being in the mix for fighting for the flyweight championship of the world. We got a featherweight matchup here between downtown TJ Brown taking on Senior Perfecto Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo, we know he has the Muay Thai and the kickboxing background. He also has a pretty lengthy Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu resume as well. Comes into the mixed martial arts side of things. He's been mixing everything up pretty well as of recently. TJ Brown with the wrestling background, obviously becoming a very complete mixed martial artist as of recently as well. We're talking about a guy that now has 26 pro fights. Bill Algeo has 23 pro fights. These guys have been around for a little bit now as they cruise past the 30-year-old mark there. And you could really argue that both these guys are in the primes of their careers right now. This is a huge fight for both men. Both these men obviously need to get a W here. So Bill Algeo will have a 1-inch reach advantage, but it may be more importantly, he's 3 inches taller. I think that he'll have that length in his legs. We know that he likes to throw a lot of kicks from the outside, and I think that that's going to be very important in this matchup. He's going to want to keep TJ Brown at bay, where he can look to outstrike him here. If you look at the productivity they've had in the octagon, Bill Algeo landing almost double of what TJ Brown has been landing in the octagon. TJ Brown relying on his grappling and his wrestling a little bit more so. Now, Bill Algeo has been absorbing more strikes as well, so that's something to take note of. But I do think that TJ Brown will have to have success solidifying some takedowns, using some ground and pound, and having some top control in this fight. I don't really think that he's going to want to just strike it out with a guy like Bill Algeo, who's very unorthodox and tricky. He'll be throwing those awkward kicks to his legs, and I think he'll control the range. TJ Brown averaging 3.62 takedowns per 15 minutes per fight basically. Bill Algeo only 0.77. We know that's not really his game, but he'll rely on his jiu-jitsu if it goes down there. Bill Algeo will have a 55% takedown defensive rate, which is pretty good, and I think that will be important here. He'll have to stuff some takedowns, keep this fight standing, and I think that Bill Algeo has the potential to do that. TJ Brown has been looking good, but I'm gonna side with Bill Algeo here. I like what I've been seeing from him overall, and like I said, he's tricky and unorthodox, and I think that I don't have a problem leaning towards his way. And real quick, we'll just take a look at what they've been doing as of recently. TJ Brown coming off that victory over Eric Silva, not the old school Eric Silva that was on steroids from Brazil. We're talking the Venezuelan Eric Silva that had a big victory on Dana White's Contender Series. Got an opportunity to fight in the UFC, had that debut fight, and TJ Brown shut him down there. Before that, he had a loss against Shilan Nurdenbeck, who Nurdenbeck just got finished there. Before that, victories over Charles Rosa and Kai Kamaka. A lot of people thought Kamaka should have got the nod there. It was a fun fight, but still, that should probably be an L there. And then he had the loss to Danny Chavez, a fighter that I've had the pleasure to chat it up with on the show, but a fighter, if we want to be honest, didn't have what it took to hang around in the UFC, and since has been cut. And that was a fighter that was talking about holding 3 belts simultaneously in the octagon. You gotta love the confidence. But Bill Algeo coming off a very tough loss, a very closely contested match against Andre Fili. We know that Fili has really been hitting his stride right now, so there's no shame in that loss. Before that, finishing Herbert Burns, defeating Joe Anderson Brito, who has shown to be a tough opponent. A loss to Ricardo Ramos in a very tough fight. And then the victory over Spike Carlisle in a very close fight. So Bill Algeo has also shown that he is willing to go to war and can dig deep and do what it takes to edge those close fights there. And so has TJ Brown. So I think this fight has all the makings to be a very fun fight. But this is what it's going to come down to here. TJ Brown's going to be looking to get in on those hips and to solidify some takedowns. I could see Bill Algeo doing something like that, scrambling and just avoiding that and shaking things up. So give me Senor Perfecto Bill Algeo to get the job done here. I think this fight plays out closely, but I think that Algeo will edge him and the strikes, and he'll do enough to get the job done. Bill Algeo is a minus 185 favorite here. TJ Brown is a plus 150 dog. And like I said, this fight has all the makings to play out closely, so be careful, throwing money around on some of these lines that are at almost, at a 2-to-1 ratio. But it's a decently accurate line. I'll edge Bill Algeo even with the minus 185 line. I'm not crazy about it. It's a little high. I think you would definitely like to have Algeo more around a minus 165 line or something like that, somewhere down there. So you keep an eye on that line, see what you can bargain. But Algeo is a tricky puzzle to solve. Give me Algeo. Another old school fighter on the card here, Clay Guida, now 41 years old, taking on Rafa García, 28 years old. Now remember what we were talking about earlier about the more youthful fighters, taking out these aged fighters that are past their primes, that are just still hanging on in the fight game. I think that this is a perfect example of that. Rafa Garcia just cruising into the prime of his career, while Clay Guida is way past his prime. I mean, look at the amount of experience that Guida has. It's pretty crazy here. We're talking about Guida, a fighter that has now had 60 pro fights compared to Rafa Garcia's 18. But all that knowledge and experience that he has, I really, let's just cut to the chase. I don't think it's going to really help him too much here. I think that Garcia has been looking pretty good as of recently, and I think that he has potential to maybe finally corner Guida and really hurt him, because Guida has been able to avoid any significant damage. As of recently, he's been somehow in the mix, stealing victories. Just kind of in there doing his thing with his movement. We know he just had a victory over Scott Holtzman, who was also a very aged fighter who was coming off a long layoff. I saw that fight live. A lot of people thought that Holtzman should have got the nod there. It was in the arena. And then before that, he got caught by a knee bar by Claudio Puelles. He had the victory over Leonardo Santos, where he was hurt very bad, but almost finished, but Santos couldn't quite finish the job. And then Santos gassed out, and Guida took advantage of that. Before that, he lost to Mark Madsen. That was a fight where there was no activity going on. And then before that, somehow defeats Michael Johnson. That was 2 years ago. But just a lot of odd type of fights going on with Clay Guida. And I just think that Rafa Garcia, like I said, is going to kind of corner him here and kind of put an end to that nonsense. Rafa Garcia, we know he trains at Team Elevation. We see him shoulder to shoulder with guys like this. I mean, Cub Swanson and Brian Ortega. I believe all three of these men of Mexican descent. And I think that Rafa Garcia has real potential to be a fighter that really represents Mexico in a solid way in the octagon. I think that he's going to start to hit his stride here. He's only 28 years old. He's very tough. He has good striking. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's a very dangerous man. And let's see if he can corner Clay Guida with all that movement and really put it on Guida. Maybe we finally see Guida get flatlined as of recently. I'm not rooting for it. For those of you guys that follow me on IG, you guys know, I was doing shots with Guida not too long ago in Miami at a BKFC event. I'll have that posted on my IG this week. So if you follow me on IG at MMA Fortune Teller _, you'll see me and Guida shooting shots. He's a very, very cool guy. He's a very good man. But you know what? The fight game is very unforgiving. And when you're fighting in the lightweight division at the age that Guida's at 41 years old, it's just usually not going to go very well. So I'll cut to the chase here. I think that Rafa Garcia gets the job done. Will he get that finish? It's hard to say. Guida has shown to be a durable guy, great movement, great cardio. But he will. I do believe that he will be outmatched here against Rafa Garcia. Let's take a look at the live betting line. Garcia is a -250. The comeback on Guida at +200. I'll even edge the value on the -250 line. I don't want nothing to do with the +200 line on Guida. I get it. He's a fan favorite. A lot of movement, a lot of activity. Crowd will probably be going nuts for him and whatnot. But no, this is going to be Garcia's coming out party, in my opinion. Let's see if he makes a big statement and can land that big shot and bloody up Guida. We got a top 15 bantamweight matchup here between Pedro Munhoz taking on Chris Gutierrez. This is a huge fight for Chris Gutierrez. We know that he's been doing his thing for some time, but this could be his coming out party. He gets a victory over the number 9th ranked Pedro Munhoz. We already know he's coming off a big victory where he was able to go out there and starch Frankie Edgar. Not that everybody isn't doing that. That's been in there with him recently. But before that, a knockout over Dana Badagarel. Hit him with that nasty spinning back fist. Before that, a split decision victory over Felipe Coleres, victory over Andre Ewell. He's been doing his thing. Where on the other hand, Pedro Munhoz, obviously that very lackluster performance against Sean O'Malley, everybody was disappointed. Losses to Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, had the victory over Jimmy Rivera, and then a loss to Frankie Edgar, right? He wasn't able to put Frankie away. We talked about everybody putting Frankie away. Pedro almost did, but just, didn't really have enough volume and enough output to finally put the stamp on that fight. A lot of people thought he should have got the nod there. He should have won the fight, but that fight should have never went to the judges' scorecards. Chris Gutierrez, we'll get back to Chris in a second here. Pedro Munhoz, we know that he has a nasty guillotine. If you're ever slacking and you stick your head under his arm, he will snatch up that guillotine almost as quickly and almost as nasty as the teller does. So, to understand that Pedro has a nasty guillotine, people have been kind of keen to that as of recently, and then they've been avoiding that. But early on in his career, snagging that up left and right. Chris Gutierrez, about as technical and as polished of a striker as you'll see in the game right now. And I want to talk about the significant strikes stats that these guys have been putting off in the UFC, throughout their career. So you'll see that Pedro Munhoz actually is landing a little bit more so than Chris in his fights at 5.4 compared to the 4.7 of Chris. But understand that Pedro has been involved in a lot of wars where there's just been a lot of back and forth going on. So those stats are a little bit inflated, but the one you want to really keep an eye on here is the amount of strikes absorbed per minute, where Pedro Munhoz is absorbing almost 6 significant strikes per minute there, which is not a good number to say the least. And Chris at 2.58, so he's being landed on at more than less than half the amount there. Chris Gutierrez with a 64% defensive rate. He is a much more technically technically sound fighter. He really is. And honestly, even offensively, he's a more technically sound fighter and just a very polished fighter, great leg kicks. And I think that he'll be a step above Pedro here as they go back and forth on the feet. I mean, Pedro's very tough. He'll walk him down. He'll look to land some heavy shots, but he's a little bit more loopy with his strikes and his boxing. I think that Chris will be throwing a nice, crisp jab down the center line. And I think that he'll use proper footwork and just outpoint Pedro. Pedro is shown to be a very durable and tough fighter. So, I'm not really banking on Pedro getting knocked out or anything like that, but I think Chris can go out there and do more than enough to take a nice decision victory here. That's the route I'm going to go. Chris, much more in the prime of his career. Remember that narrative we talked about earlier? Well, Chris Gutierrez, 31 years old, cruising into the prime of his career. Pedro, he's been through the ringer a little bit. He's 36 years old for the bantamweight division. That's getting up there in age. Chris Gutierrez, 3 inches taller. He'll also have about a 2.5 inch reach advantage as well. I think there's some good signs for Chris going into this match. I think that this is another solid matchup for him. I think this is a fight that really favors him. Pedro has the name, has the ranking. I'm going to be taking Chris El Guapo Gutierrez to get the job done here. And you also keep in mind that him and his team have really been having a lot of success. We know that he's put in a lot of work with Jonathan Martinez. Martinez was able to steal a little victory there against Nurmagomedov, Saad Nurmagomedov. I mean, either way, he had a great performance and he kept that fight close. But their gym and what they've been doing over there, they've been really putting in some solid work. So I am going to be taking Chris Gutierrez, who now has what have we got? 21. 23 pro fights. He's getting that experience under his belt, and it's time now for him to be involved in these big fights. And Chris Gutierrez is a minus 220 favorite to come back on Pedro Munhoz at plus 175. People obviously on to the success that Chris Gutierrez has been having, and people looking to fade Pedro a little bit here as you see that plus 175 line. It's not a cheap line, but I'll say I have no problem with the minus 220 line. I'll side with that more than the plus 175 line on Pedro. I think that Pedro will be there to be hit, and I think that Chris will just land. He'll land on him more so. And when they go to the judges' scorecards, you're going to see that lean toward Chris Gutierrez's way. That's how I'm seeing this fight take place. So Tanner Boser dropping down to the light heavyweight division, taking on Ian Cutelaba. I think that this is a very solid move for Tanner Boser. I think his frame is much more fit for the light heavyweight division. I'm excited to see him drop down here to the LHW division. He's only 31 years old, still has a lot of time to make some noise in this division as well. There's been some ups and downs throughout his career, but he has shown when he puts it together, he's a very dangerous fighter. Ian Cutelaba, Cutelaba has really had some tough times in the octagon as of recently. He's on a 3-fight losing skid. You talk about the losses that he's taken, got knocked out by Kennedy and Nchekou, got submitted by Johnny Walker, and then was also submitted by Ryan Spann as well. So really having a tough time since his last victory over Devin Clark, where he kind of nullified Clark with the wrestling and really wasn't doing much. Before that, was able to take the first round against Dustin Jacoby, if I remember correctly, and got a 10-8 round, I believe. And then Dustin Jacoby ended up just picking him apart for the last 2 rounds. So, when you really look at all that, just nothing really too impressive going on. On the other hand, Tanner Boser coming off a tough split decision loss against Rodrigo Nascimento. Before that, had the knockout victory over OSP, and then a split loss to Elir Latifi, and a loss to Andrei Arlovsky. The Arlovsky loss was definitely a very disappointing performance for Tanner at the time, because Tanner was really starting to get some momentum. He was coming off that Rafael Pessoa knockout, and he should have went in there and tried to land more on Andrei Arlovski. He played into Arlovski's game of, the little pitter-patter back and forth, losing that decision. But now we talked about him dropping down in weight. Look at the shape that he's in going into this fight. He has leaned up, and he definitely had room to lean up when you take a look at his frame in the heavyweight division. I love what I'm seeing here. I mean, this guy's chiseled up, and I think that he's going to look to be the best version of himself going into this fight. And I think that the Cutelaba matchup is a perfect one for him. If he goes out here and really looks to push his foot on the pedal, I think that he can get Cutelaba out of here. I think that Cutelaba is not in a good space mentally, coming off all these losses. Excuse me there. He's only 29 years old, but, taking the losses that he has, I don't really know where he's at mentally. And I think that if Boser really puts it on him, I could see Cutelaba looking for a way out. I haven't been very impressed with what I've seen from Cutelaba. We know Cutelaba has the wrestling background. He's a strong wrestler, but he'll also fade. His gas tank's not the best, and if you just give him some adversity, you stuff some of those takedowns eventually, and you start to push back on him, he will start to fade. His striking is not the best either. He has some decent power, but it's really not the best striking in the division, to say the least. And I think that Tanner Boser can actually box him up and look to land some big shots. Tanner has some good footwork, and I'm pointing towards Tanner here. Tanner will have a half-inch reach advantage. He'll be an inch taller. Nothing too crazy going on there. And again, when you look at his frame, this is his light heavyweight frame. Expect to see him more chiseled out. And I'm going to take Tanner Boser to get a finish. How about that? I'm going to edge Tanner to get a finish here. I think that there's just a very realistic possibility that happens. Now, take a look at this. You guys know, whenever we're pulling up Cutelaba's IG, we always like to admire the old sly fox that he's always side to side with. But look at the size of the noggin of Cutelaba. You would think that it would help him take a shot even better, but also that's a very large landing target. As you see, his skull is easily 3 times the size of his old lady. So you could take 3 of those skulls and kind of stuff them in there, and they'll fit. So, he is a true pit bull, is Cutelaba. I mean, look at this noggin right here, man. You guys know I'm a big Cutelaba fan. I love the energy that he brings to the press conferences, or to the weigh-ins, at least. I would say the weigh-ins. He's not really making the walk to the press conferences that much these days, and after this loss, he might not be fighting in the UFC. So, you got Tanner Boser at a plus 105 line. You got Cutelaba at a minus 125. Little surprised to see that betting line, if you ask me. I'm definitely going to say there's more value on Tanner Boser here. I think he puts it together. I think that his confidence will be high. I think that he's been putting in the work here. The cut shouldn't be a problem, and I think he's the more mentally stable fighter going into this fight, and even his skill set points towards being more successful in this matchup, in my opinion. Give me Tanner Boser to get the job done with the potential for that finish. Staying put in the light heavyweight division, we got a top 15 matchup between Dustin Jacoby taking on Azamat Murzakanov. I'm really liking this matchup here. Dustin Jacoby, ever since he made his way back to the UFC, jumping up in weight, getting all that experience over in Glory Kickboxing, I really have been impressed with what I've seen from him throughout the years. The way he switches stances, the way he uses his length and striking, he just has impressed me a lot. Azamat Murzakanov, since his fight on Dana White's Contender Series, I believe, and then making his way into the UFC, he has just shown that he has absolute fight-ending ability, carries dynamite in his hands, his knees. How about the victory he had in his UFC debut, where he was down on the scorecards against the African Tafan Nchukwi, but eventually just landing that flying knee in the 3rd round. That was an official play of mine, and trust me, I was biting my nails sitting at the end of my seat. When he landed that, I was going absolutely bonkers. All right, so he definitely has fight-ending ability. We just saw that again in his last fight, where he was able to finish Devin Clark. He is undefeated. He's 12-0. A little undersized for the division, if you ask me, and you're going to see a real length advantage for Jacoby in the spot here, as you'll have, roughly a 4.5-inch reach advantage. He's 5 inches taller. Jacoby switching stances. I think that he can really give Azamat Murzakanov some problems from the outside. Sometimes Jacoby does participate too much in those types of wars. I think that he should slow things down here. He doesn't want to get caught up in a war with a guy like Azamat, because it'll only take one shot for him to get flatlined. I mean, Azamat has shown that he has that type of power. I think that Jacoby should really slow things down, work the leg kicks from the outside, and just try to outpoint Azamat. I think that there'll be not an easy, but there's a very realistic avenue for him to cruise towards a decision victory here. So that's going to be very important for him. I mean, we know that Jacoby has the fight-ending ability as well, as you see him there when he had a huge knockout victory over Da On Jung. Now he's coming off a loss against Khalil Roundtree. Many people believe that was an absolute robbery, if you guys remember. So you check all the media scorecards and whatnot. Everyone had Jacoby winning that fight, if I remember correctly. And Jacoby should be... he should have had that winning streak continuing into this fight. And I think that the masses really understand that. So, you know... how do we see this fight taking place? I'm going to just jump back to what I said. I think that Jacoby can avoid that big shot here and can outpoint Azamat. We saw in his fight against Tafan and Chukwi that he can have a slow start and really be landed on. And, you know, I'll lean more towards that way. Now, you'll see that Jacoby is definitely putting out more strikes per minute, 5.58 compared to Azamat's 4.63 in the cage. But believe it or not, Azamat only absorbing 2.44 strikes per minute, while Jacoby is absorbing 3.98. Again, circulating back to that important narrative that Jacoby needs to slow things down and play this fight very, very defensively sound. If he doesn't, it could be a rough night for him. But I will say Jacoby uses the footwork and fights an intelligent fight here and does enough to outstrike and outpoint Azamat, and will win a unanimous decision. How about that? All right, so Dustin Jacoby will be the pick. Let's go take a look at the betting line. Dustin Jacoby is a minus 190 favorite. I'll be honest with you guys, it kind of caught me off guard. I was thinking maybe you would see that more towards minus 170 range or something like that. You know, with Azamat being undefeated, knocking everybody out. But I guess people are doing their homework and they're understanding in depth the performances that he's had, you know, the slow starts to some of those fights, and the very realistic possibility that he just gets outpointed here if he doesn't land that big shot. So, you know, not really crazy about that line. I want that down more like around a minus 170 line. Keep an eye on how that line's moving, and that'll be a very fun fight. Billy Q looking to get a number next to his name in the featherweight division. Currently unranked, but he's taken on the 14th ranked featherweight. Somewhat of a legend in the game in Edson Barbosa, a fighter that has landed quite possibly the most amazing knockout that we've ever seen. I still remember seeing that spinning heel kick landed as I was at the local bar. The bar was going absolutely crazy. That was way back in the day. Edson Barbosa, now 37 years old. He will have a 5-inch reach advantage going into this fight here. He'll be an inch taller. He has that length in his frame going against Billy Q. But Billy Q is just an absolute tornado. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He has some good grappling to go along with the volume that he puts off on the feet. Check this out. Billy Q landing 7.88 strikes per minute in the octagon compared to Barbosa's not too shabby either, 3.96. This has all the makings of being a war here. Billy Q absorbing a lot of strikes as well, so that could be dangerous against a guy like Barbosa. We know he's a sharpshooter, and that's why I think there's a couple different ways this fight can go, which we're going to get more to here in a second. But, you know, Billy Q, 34 years old. He's not that young. He got into the UFC a little bit later in his career, but he's been putting in work for quite a bit. This is a guy that has 21 professional fights, and he has a lot of recognizable names under his belt. Edson Barbosa, we know that he's basically, he's fought through the UFC all throughout the prime of his career. He's battled with some of the best fighters in the world. We know there is a recipe to take out a guy like Edson Barbosa. You want to close the distance on him, and you really want to smother him, and you want to make it an ugly fight. And that's not to say that he hasn't evolved over the years, also learning how to weather the storm. We've seen him... if you think about the Shane Burgos fight, right, where he stopped Burgos, that was a fight where he really was just in the mix in that absolute war, and eventually landed a fight-ending shot himself. But we know that a lot of these fighters have looked to close the distance on him and eventually break him. I mean, if you think back to when Tony Ferguson did it way back in the day and pulled off the Darce choke, obviously Khabib, and just there's been quite a list of guys that have gone in there looking to implement that same type of fighting style. You don't want to sit on the outside and have a kickboxing match with a guy like Barbosa. He'll chop your legs up, and that's something he will be looking to do in this matchup here. Where on the other hand, Billy Q has shown to have some pretty solid jiu-jitsu. He'll control you down on the mat. He'll also look to smash your head in down on the. He'll look to smash your head through the canvas down on the mat as well. He has good striking, and I think that he's just he's a good fighter. I think that Billy Q is a very solid and well-rounded fighter, and I think that he's a fighter that can go out here and implement those tactics that we talked about as far as closing the distance, making this a crazy war. And you got to edge Billy Q in that type of fight, especially when you talk about the fact that Edson Barbosa is now 37 years old, again, making the cut down to the featherweight division. We know that he's fought in the lightweight division throughout the majority of his career. He's recently been dropping down to the featherweight division, and he's been making the weight, and he's been looking pretty good in there. But you have to understand, when you're mixing in the age and the weight cut and the damage that he's taken throughout the years, you think about some of the wars that he's been in, going to war with guys like Paul Felder and just a bunch of different names you could throw out there. I think that Billy Q will be the more fresh fighter here, even though he's 34 years old. I think he's the much more fresh fighter, and I think if this fight ends up turning out to be a war, I'm taking Billy Q here, and I think that Billy Q will bring that type of fight. He'll look to close the distance, and I'm edging Billy Q here. I think that he can use his grappling to kind of edge this fight. I think maybe he can land a fight-ending shot in the feet, and with that being said, yes, obviously Edson Barbosa can land that fight-ending shot as well. He's an absolute sniper. He has knees, elbows, spinning kicks, all that. His boxing's good. This should be a very fun fight, but I am taking Billy Q. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. And Billy Q is a minus 175 favorite. Barbosa is a plus 144. I'll say that there's a little bit more value on the Barbosa line, in my opinion. I thought this line would be a little bit closer. I was close to maybe edging Barbosa as the pick here, but I really couldn't. The more you break down the tape and you understand the greater possibility of how this fight's going to take place, it favors Billy Q much more so, and I will take Billy Q to get the job done here. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a finish. Barbosa's up there in age. We talked about the weight cut, but Barbosa has shown to be a very tough fighter. Either way, Billy Q can rely on the grappling to steal some rounds as well, and I don't mean in a boring fashion. I'm talking about getting this fight down to the mat and scoring some points down there as well. But give me Billy Q, the always very fun fighter to watch there. Let's see how that fight plays out. Hey guys, real quick, if you're looking for a new sports book, reach out to me. I'm going to keep that same offer that I had on the table. I'm going to give you guys 2 free fight card packages for my official bets if you guys sign up through my referral link. All you got to do is reach out to me through email, Instagram, Twitter, whatever one works best for you. Shoot me a message. I'll give you more details, but I'll give you that referral link. If you sign up through the referral link, you're going to get an added bonus to your Bovada.lv account. And like I said, I'm going to hook you up with some official plays there. So if you guys are interested, feel free to reach out to me. We got a huge featherweight matchup here. One of the greats, Max Holloway, taking on Arnold Allen, a fighter that is really starting to make some noise. We know that the UFC has really slow played Arnold Allen's career, and it really has done him a service, in my opinion. He's starting to really feel himself. His confidence is at an all-time high, and he's starting to get the big names in front of him now. And so far, he's been delivering. We know that he's coming off a couple of victories over some really big names. Calvin Kattar, of course, had that knee injury there. Before that, knocking out Dan Hooker. And then before that, a very underrated victory over Sadiq Youssef, a very dangerous striker as well. Nick Lentz and Gilbert Melendez before that. Those were those types of layup matches I've been talking about. Max Holloway, Max Holloway is basically going out there getting the job done every single time, unless he's fighting a guy by the name of Alexander Volkanovski. So, I almost said Alexander Volkov. He does not want that smoke with Volkov, I'll tell you that much. I know Max Holloway says he'll fight anybody at any weight, but he don't want to take on Volkov, I'll tell you that. One of the Twin Towers there. Max Holloway, these are the types of fights that he really thrives in, right? He might lose an occasional big matchup, like we talked about in those Volkanovski matchups, but when he bounces back and takes on another young and hungry up-and-comer, he usually shuts the door on them. We know that his striking and his boxing is some of the best we've ever seen in the UFC. The amount of output that he puts off in his fights is pretty ridiculous, landing 7.24 strikes per minute compared to Arnold Allen's 3.4. We're talking about more than double the amount of strikes being put out there. But also, you do have to note that Holloway eats a lot of shots, absorbing 4.89 strikes per minute, while Allen much more defensively sound. And that could be a problem because Arnold Allen has showed that his striking and his power is really coming around. And, you know, there's only so much damage you could take. I mean, I'm not going to bet against Max Holloway's chin here. But you do have to understand that Max Holloway has taken a lot of damage throughout his career. He's only 31 years old still, which is kind of crazy to think. You know, a lot of these fighters, you blink and before you know it, they're in their mid-30s. But Holloway, he started so young. You know, I still remember him fighting guys like DP, Dustin Poirier back in the day, getting submitted when he was just a little skinny kickboxer in the featherweight division. It's been great to see Holloway's career progress. And, you know, and then same could be said for Arnold Allen, but the time is now for Allen. Allen really needs to start making a name for himself in the game. He's really been under the radar, like we said, and I know he wants the big fights. He wants the name in the game, and he's going to have to shake things up right now. And if he can go out there and get a knockout against a guy like Max Holloway, that would be huge for his career. And you could be talking about him fighting for the belt in the very near future. You got Volkanovski and the very talented Mexican Yair Rodriguez set to face off next in the division. You know, there was talks of maybe Volkanovski facing off in a rematch against Islam. Either way, this fight is very pivotal for the featherweight division. Arnold Allen only tasting defeat once. You know, he's going to have, you know, let's take a look at the stats is here. So Arnold Allen will have a 1-inch reach advantage, even though he is 3 inches shorter. That's a little bit interesting there. I talked about the power that Arnold Allen has been showcasing recently. You know, that all being said, I have a feeling that Max Holloway will hold up in this match. I think his chin will hold up. And I'm going to say that Holloway puts that volume out there and can take 3 of these 5 rounds. Yeah, he has always showed to have good takedown defense, especially towards the latter half of his career. I mean, he really has rounded out to be a very well-rounded and dangerous fighter. And Max is just one of my favorite fighters in the game. He looks to be in phenomenal shape going into this match. And these are the types of fights that typically Max really rises to the occasion in. You know, a main event fight against a young and up-and-comer. I guess you wouldn't really call him an up-and-comer, but you guys get what I'm saying. A fighter that's looking to carve out his own name off of Max. Max typically comes through in these types of spots, and I got to side with Max here. I'll be honest with you guys. I was contemplating Arnold Allen, and I was kind of taking a whiff over on the Arnold Allen side, seeing what that smelled like. But I had to ground myself, and I have to roll with Max Holloway in this spot. I think that the volume, the boxing, the chin will all come into play. The takedown defense. I think that this fight will end up being somewhat of a war, and I think at the end of the day, Max Holloway will be the fighter that prevails. He's a -190 favorite against Allen here. I don't know if I'm necessarily crazy about that line, if I want to be honest with you guys. We don't really know how Allen's going to show up here. He's been looking better and better every fight, and he's cruising into the prime of his career. This is the biggest fight of his career. You have to imagine that he's coming in super sharp here, and there's a couple moving parts, a couple of variables. I don't know if I'm willing to pay a 2-to-1 line on Max Holloway. Haven't really finalize my decision there on that, but I do like Holloway to win this fight, and that's the type of fight that I would have liked the line on Max more around that -175. But these lines are greedy. There's some tough lines out there, and you know, maybe you wanted Holloway even lower than that. I don't know. I do believe the value is probably more so on a +155 line on Arnold Allen, in my opinion. This is going to be a great match, but I will take Max Holloway to win a decision. And maybe he really starts to catch his groove and really starts to put it on Allen late in this fight. He has that experience going deep and championship type fights. And I will take all that experience and all the skills that Max has. And as good as he looks going into this fight, I got to take Max Holloway to get the job done here. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Fight Night Kansas City. I'm excited for the main event. And there's a couple fights throughout this card here that are very intriguing and exciting. So you guys know how it goes, man. Every weekend we're glued to the screen. We're watching these fights. If we're on the road, we got the phone glued to our face. We're watching every fight. You guys saw me on the beach, you know, watching the fights on my iPad. We never miss any UFC action, as I'm sure you guys don't either. It's what our weekends consist of, one way or another. Whether we're at a wedding, throwing the fights over on the side on the table, or you're eating and dancing, we just don't miss any fights, and you guys know how it goes. This is another exciting fight card. The UFC just continues to give us these treats, and I'm excited for this weekend. I'll leave you guys with this. You know, I like to throw you guys some messages, nothing deep here, but I'll say this, you know, that last prediction video that I did, I told you guys it was not my best. You guys know that it was one of the toughest cards that we've had. And listen, the amount of views I had on it, was one of my more productive videos as far as the views go, touching that 10K view mark. You guys know I'm continuously just working on my craft over here, trying to branch out this channel, grow this channel out. And obviously I was a little disappointed having, I'm sure, a lot of new viewers and not getting that productivity. But for those of you guys that have been with me for the long haul, you guys know I do consistently put a good product out, and I'm pretty accurate with my picks and whatnot. If you're new to the channel, you guys will see that moving forward, but you guys can use that analogy for whatever you guys got going on in your life. Just continue to grind. Sometimes you might have a giant opportunity and you might feel like you dropped the ball a little bit. Just continue to move forward, keep marching forward. You guys know that's what I'm doing here. I'll keep pumping these videos out to you guys as I'm working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and I want to continue to fine-tune my product here on this YouTube channel and everything I got going on with my IG, Twitter. So you guys do the same thing, right? If you feel like you dropped the ball a little bit, just get right back to the grind, keep moving forward, keep thinking about what you can do to evolve and grow yourself, and anything you're doing, whether it's working out, taking care of yourself, your work, your business, if you're a fighter, any of that stuff, keep going to the gym, keep training. You guys know what I'm talking about. Just keep pushing forward. All right, guys? So on that note, we'll sign out. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.